Okay, so actually I can start if you don't mind. I will share my screen. So actually the issue I would like to discuss with you today was brought by one of Magento maintainers. He is currently on the call. That was Yaroslav Rogaza. And actually, we discovered that issue in the scope of MSI, but actually not really MSI dependent, because we experience it currently on Magento 2.2 and Magento 2.1. Looks like it was implemented at some time in Magento 1, like some hard fix for that issue, but currently it was broken and we don't have fix in Magento 2 currently. So the main issue we experience now that we have the product data and the inventory data on the same form. And when currently admin opens the product page and start editing some data for some particular SKU, during that time the order could be placed on a front end by customer, and which will lead for the stock deduction. But when the admin will finish editing his form and apply his changes and will persist the data, he will write the state which was already modified by that order which is placed on front end. And here is actually the issue which was brought on a GitHub. We close that issue as not an issue, but that's definitely actually an issue, and there are actually merchants affected with this problem. Actually, as a quick fix, we can introduce, because actually the issue happens mostly for admin UI. So we can, for example, add the invisible hidden input, which will replicate the quantity for product, and we'll try to persist quantity just in case if it was modified, if it's not the same as initial one. Especially taking into account that we already introduced new APIs, and currently inventory in the scope of the MSI we have dedicated API for inventory, and it is not anymore coupled with the persistence of the product. So before that, in Magento 2.1 and Magento 2.2, we had to save the product, and in the scope of the product, we had the extension attribute stock item, and saving the product, we say the stock item belong to that product. So currently we can check that, but let's look at the admin form for product editing. And currently we have the quantity, and also we will have all the quantities for all the source item to which the product is assigned to. So actually, even if you will add this fix like with a quantity correction, that would be like a very, very quick fix. So probably we need to at least discuss like more mature decision, which like desirable state, which supposed to solve this issue, and also all the similar issue which we can stuck with. Because actually, potentially this issue is applicable for any attribute. And when we have admins who work in simultaneously in several sessions, and one of that will update the product or any other entity, after that, another one can just override his changes. So here we can have several options how we can resolve that issue. So the basic solution which will help us to prevent this issue for all kind of entities is versioning of entity based on the ORM. And but this is like more low level. Another one, if we will just separate the product editing out of the inventory, and probably we need to introduce like dedicated probably inventory menu item here, so the persistence of the form would not lead to under the hood to two API calls, because currently saving the product here we will process two API calls, the product save repository and the API call to inventory.
Sorry, Igor, if I correctly understand you, we can avoid this issue for EE by using staging. So we have versioning for catalogs. So,
but neither staging nor versioning that Igor is talking about will solve the problem of decrementing stock on checkout and overwriting the stock when user when admin saves product.
Yes, I remember we had a proposal to implement something like MVCC for a stock as well. So
I don't think. Well, okay. So I think there are two separate topics. First is pessimistic or optimistic locking, which for products in admin. When someone edits, when one admin edits the product, the other admin cannot edit it. That would be pessimistic locking, or conflict resolution later. That's a separate topic, right? And for that, the plan is to use some kind of locking, but not MVCC, because MVCC, like, okay, so we introduce MVCC, so what happens? I save something, someone else saves something, so now we have two versions, and the end result will be the same as now, because the later version will just override the older version. So what do we do with MVCC?
We can prevent applying the changes if the code which initiated persistence is not in the latest version.
Yeah, I understand, but in that case, it is not MVCC, but optimistic locking, basically. It will work same as optimistic locking, right?
Yes, more or less.
So that's the thing that we actually want. But I think the more important issue, like the important issue that we have to resolve, first important issue, is that today in Magento, inventory is a part of catalog. I would say catalog bounded context, right? We want to separate it.
Exactly.
That's the first issue. And second one, even if we separate inventory from catalog, we still have this form, product edit form, where we set inventory. And this problem is not trivial because we intentionally added inventory, if I remember correctly, to product edit form first page to make it easy to create products in Magento, right? And now removing it would make product creation inconvenient again. So to make a product visible on storefront, you would have to save product, go to inventory, create inventory item for product, and only then the product would be visible on storefront, right? That would be an unexpected.
We can keep this form for a newly created product and remove from, disable editing for existing ones due to the fact this product is active. Only if product is inactive, we can allow the merchant to change the quantity.
That might be a good idea. So like a product edit, stock editing is a separate page, but as a shortcut on product creation form, you have explicitly separated explicit as a shortcut a stock editing information. I think that is something we have to. This is more of a product question.
Yeah.
And
actually, I have another proposal which would not affect the current look and feel. So actually, the problem that the sending of this form initiate under the hood two different API queries. So what we can do, we can prevent so currently when we send in the form, we literally the reload the page. So if we will catch that, and if we will send the two different Ajax queries, and after that, when we will get the response, we will behave like the single page application. It would be like two different queries, and we no need to process, for example, the second call. So the UI would not initiate the inventory if we change nothing on the inventory form, let's say. So we will just end up with one Ajax query saving the product data.
In that case, you are talking about a more advanced JavaScript form that would be just comparing, listening what fields were changed, right?
Actually, like some time ago, we had that conversation that we can make all our forms not to reload page, but gather all data, which gonna be sent and proceed with Ajax query, and after that go initiate the GET request.
Okay, so
This is more a product decision.
well, okay. If we decide to remove the inventory from product edit form for editing products, it's a product decision. If we decide to fix it through advanced forms, then it's not a product decision. It's just something we have to fix.
Yes. Yeah, but this is a product decision. Do we have to? As for me, the decision remove inventory management from product editing page. We can still have it for a product editing, but for product editing, really we can remove it. So product decides that we have to support current editing form. Yes. Well, only in this case we have to do this complicated thing. This is my personal opinion. Also, I want to mention one more thing. That's maybe do we have the same problem with the product import?
With the product import, actually, I believe we have the similar product problem for most of the entities, even just editing the entity. But regarding the inventory, it happens, it affects much more because it's really hard to track that order was been placed, and you can't prevent, and you don't want to prevent that order being placed during the product editing.
Okay, so what is our preferred solution technically?
So
is more advanced forms or hiding inventory field from product edit form?
Well, sorry, and to be clear, the advanced forms proposal does not address the full problem. It only addresses the use case where there's no change made to the quantity field, and so there's no possibility of entering into this overwrite scenario. However, if we use the advanced forms method, the user changes the quantity, and during the time they've been editing this page, an order comes in, we still have the overwrite. So it solves the problem, but only partially, only in the case where the quantity is not edited.
Yes. So question to you, Mark: is it a big problem? The user actually edited the form.
I really don't think it's a massive problem because we don't get a lot of feedback on that. Mm-hmm. The other thing is we don't have, I guess merchants that follow best practices have some type of separation over who's allowed to make what changes. And they would typically have, maybe one user making inventory changes, merchandisers making product changes. As they get larger, they may use the PIM or other things to do import-export. So they don't have the same situation where they have 10 admins going in there at the same time. Probably more of a use case where they have 2 admins that their activities are not coordinated. I just think your original point, or one of your prior points about if we separate the two, which is one of the options, so we have a stock section now, or an inventory section in addition to the product section, it adds a lot of complexity and extra work for the merchant. And I'm hesitant to do that unless we know that the current configuration is causing them a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I understand technically the possibility that we can enter this overwrite scenario, but I'm not aware of a lot of people reporting that they're running into the problem.
Okay. So I think we started this conversation because technically we want to separate inventory from products, right? We want to for them to have a completely separate API. We want product basically we want product interface to never have any information about stock. And we want our product code to catalog code to never have any information about stock either.
Yes, and actually on the level of interfaces, we already implemented that in a new MSI. But still we have the same UI. And based on that, we send in the form, we send both information for the product and for inventory.
Well, I guess I think the answer to our question is okay. So technically, APIs can be separate. This can be separate. So let's imagine we will build this with microservices, right? Inventory and catalog can be absolutely separate microservices, right? Today, like if we separated them, but it doesn't mean that admin UI also has to be separate. So we can keep the fields on the product admin form, and if this is not a big issue, not a big technical issue, we can do. Not a big user issue. We can do nothing for now. If it's a kind of issue, and I agree that it's a kind of issue that we want to solve, and have more advanced forms that don't submit a field if the field wasn't edited, but that might be a problem of breaking chains for some scenarios, right?
I believe we can face even more serious issue with our service contracts. So how even our not service contract but resource model will proceed product request without catalog inventory?
It already can proceed the request without catalog inventory.
But that means that the inventory should be removed.
Actually, yes, we want to remove the existing catalog inventory, and it would be removed. So, but in a later version of Magento. So after we will still support the stock item in the scope of the product product entity, but we are going to deprecate this possibility.
Okay, so I think the only summary of this is that we keep the inventory field on product edit form and product admin form, product creation form, and we investigate the price of changing the form to make it more efficient.
Okay, the question I have, whether we need to introduce kind of quick fix, so we can introduce like a hidden fields, like initial quantity, and on an admin part, when we receive the form, we can check whether the initial quantity has been changed or not, and if so, we will proceed with the API. And also, it would be like the more cheaper way than if we will retrieve, because retrieval is not the option, because the entity could be changed along the way, but we will have like two versions of the quantity, like initial one and which is not visible on the form, and the one which is visible. So we will check whether these quantities are different or not, and if they are different, so we will make an assumption that admin change intentionally quantity, and we need to proceed with persistence.
Well, sorry guys, Igor, can we involve in this conversation Vitaly Karaton? I believe that when UI forms were created, this was the initial requirement to check to track changes on these forms. Yeah. And I remember that these forms have some logic related to this. So maybe we even have some.
But currently we don't send any attributes saying that the form field has been changed or not. We just send the form field. That's all.
Okay, so talk to Vitaly. Actual implementation of this, I don't think we should discuss it now. I would not. In my comment on that side, I would not add hidden field. There are better ways to track changes in JavaScript.
But just an assumption of how that could be implemented with a quick fix.
Yeah, but I mean, tracking it in JavaScript can also be done quick. But I think it might be even quicker if that functionality is already supported, it's just not enabled at this form. So
okay.
I believe maybe it's.
And like in a general scope, are we going to support this on the level of new ORM? So whether we would like to support this kind of versioning?
Versioning, so I think we agree that we don't need versioning in this scenario. We might need locking.
But actually the behavior which you mentioned was like optimistic versioning. If we have the version of the entity which is incrementally updated. But
you don't need the versioning for that. You can say that okay, so you can have comparison of you can like compare it, make it on the presentation layer, implement this feature on presentation layer. You don't need it on persistence layer. But we may want to implement this for web API either. How would you implement it for a web API? If you will send the version of the entity. So we will always send the current version of the entity on top of which we would like to apply our changes. And if that version is different from the current version on the server, we would not apply the changes and we will throw the exception and we will say, and we'll ask the client code to reload the entity. Okay, but again, this even in Web API, I think it makes sense to implement it on Web API on presentation layer, which is Web API, not on persistence layer. But some layer, and probably that would be low layer, need to track that entity and update it. No, we don't need to track that entity. The only thing, as you described it, the only thing we need to track is versions. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. So before persisting something, you read its version. If the version is bigger than what you received in request, you don't persist it. But that version should be updated by whom? So version is updated. Version can be updated on presentation layer, and so version can be managed on presentation layer or on persistence layer, but version check can be performed on presentation layer. But there could be different presentation layer, like in a hexagonal architecture. Like
I actually agree that managing of race conditions and logs is a business of persistent layer, so it should be located in persistence layer.
Yes, because it could be like web API, it could be message queue, so it could be different clients accessing the same entity, and each of them will affect the entity and increase the version. Yeah, well, I think we might implement it a bit different way, but why I think it should be on presentation layer, because internally there should be a way, and it should be a natural way to override not caring about version. Right, so your operation of persistence should be simple. It should not know about versions.
right? You understand? So it might be the version check should be can be on infrastructure layer, but it should be a wrapper around our persistence adapter.
Anton, for me, it sounds like you just say that we need to have different strategies for persistence layer, but this this should be configured somewhere at composition root.
I
So
think
when we bootstrap application, but not a decision of a persistent layer.
Different strategies.
Oh.
The client should make decision if they use versioning or not. So it's same operation invoked differently for different clients.
Like an optional validation, because for some cases, like import, maybe we even cannot add such functionality to it. Like this, we will process batches. But definitely, yeah, we can do this for.
Yeah. So in this case, for entry point of import export, we will configure our persistence layer in that way that it will just do not perform check on versioning. But for example, on other APIs, we'll just provide such configurations that we'll use this strategies that will check configuration, and persistent presentation layer should not know nothing about how this object will be stored. It should just pass the end data and they will be saved or no.
It's a way to implement it, but for me, it looks like a lot more bulky way and lot less convenient, a lot less natural way. If you have to, for every client, you have to configure your persistence layer differently. This is the same operation of persistence, so you might have different interfaces that you're working with. But I think we have to run to next meeting. Let's if you guys have a proposal on implementation of locking, let's describe the proposal. Let's discuss it. But to summarize what we agreed to in this meeting, we do not separate, we do not remove quantity field from product form. We do not change anything on server side. We fix the problem on form level, right?
Yes.
And
even to do that, we should have maybe a set of proposals for how to get it done. I don't want to. I know, Igor, you proposed the hidden field. It seems like there's other methods to accomplish the same outcome. We should get a sense of what options we have and pick the best one.
Okay.
And please prepare the design for locking if you have ideas for entity versioning.
And entity versioning locking is gonna be addressing the ORM, as I understood.
I don't think it should be addressed in ORM, but let's discuss.
Okay.
It requires more time for discussion.
Okay, got it. So thank you. Looks like we got an agreement here. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, guys, bye.